I'm talking about the willpower and the discipline and the drive from inside to not be able to accept the status quo and to move from where you're at to where you want to be. Well, hello friends, and welcome back to the cabin. And we certainly hope that everybody is having a great week, and hopefully they're having better weather than we are. It is raining again, so I thought I would, take some time maybe and sit here and talk to you and do a little video and kind of let you know where I'm at with the cabin here. So it's really nice to have that system in place now, because I don't have to come in, drag my cords in, fire up the generators, let them run for a while to charge up all the different batteries that I was using in here, and then take them back outside. It would, help me for the next 24 hours. I would have, the power that I needed to do anything I needed with. But, batteries, they get low, right? And you got to charge them back up. It's really nice to not have to be able to come in here and fire up generators and continue to do that. So I'm just really happy that we got that installed, because it is a big plus for us up here at the cabin, and it saves me time. And something else that I want to bring to your attention too is we're still getting so many comments, like I've said before, from around the world on the last two videos that we've done. And I did it because it was some statements that were made about podcasters and people on YouTube or other platforms of social media, which, that's what YouTube is, right? Comments that were made that had very foul, and when I say foul, I mean foul language. And I just, I sit there and I look at that and I think, my goodness, the English language is so vast. And there are so many other words that we could choose to use. Why do we want to use foul language? Because it doesn't help anything. It doesn't emphasize your point anymore. It doesn't help anything. If anything, it makes you look much smaller when you use language like that. So what I did was I have went through there, because this is a family channel, right? I went through there, and if I seen a comment like that, they were X'd from being able to make any other public comment. Because first of all, I don't feel threatened by those types of comments, so there's no point in you trying to make them. Now, I'm not talking about our regular viewers. I'm talking about the people that feel like that they can come in here and just spread foul language on the channel through public comments. Well, you're not going to. We're not going to let you, all right? You're going to be censored, like a lot of good people have in the last few years, right? So we're going to let some of those foul people have a taste of their own medicine. But irregardless of that, this is a family channel, and we care about our viewers. We care about the public comments that we have. It's okay for you to leave a comment. It's okay for you to disagree. But you're not going to use foul language to disagree, because you're not going to be able to do it on this platform. Now, I welcome anybody's comment, because we have the freedom of speech in this country. Some other countries may not have that. And I know that there's a lot of folks that didn't want us to have it here in the U.S., but we still have it. And you're not going to be able to use that type of language on this channel. And I'm not going to rant anymore on that, but I'll tell you, it highly upsets me when we have good people on here and public comments or for everyone to view, and people can't be decent. Even though they may not agree, people can't be decent to other people and respect them, because it's like reading garbage, and we're not going to allow that. So anyway, that's enough rant right there. If you were ever raised on a farm, when I was a kid growing up, we had our own hogs, we had beef that we would kill and put in the freezer. We raised our own gardens. We would actually raise about 3 every year, because 2 of the gardens, all of the produce that we raised from there, my grandfather would take it and hand it out to his policyholders when the harvest would start coming in, as he would go by to collect insurance from them, because that's the way you used to do back in the day. You didn't have this online where you could pay, and a lot of people would run down to the insurance company if they were in town and pay their bill, but you still had men out in the field that would go by and would collect the premium for the insurance, and then at the end of the week they would go to the office, make out the report and hand it in, and then start over the next week doing the same thing. So that's the way that business was done when I was growing up. And my grandfather was such a good businessman because he appreciated other people doing business with him. And kind of like what's going on in the country today, where we're talking about, fair trade. My grandfather, like I said, we would raise these 2 gardens, right? And the policyholders that he had who bought insurance from him, he would be working on the side on weekends, and as a family we were working with him because that was our living. We would take that harvest, and as he would go throughout the week, he would hand people vegetables and fruits and things like that, give them small bags, like the little bags that you get when you go to Walmart or any of the places that you may shop. And he would give them a small bag of some of the produce that we raised, in appreciation for doing business with him. And his policyholders loved him. And he sold insurance for 27 years before he had the stroke and was forced to retire. But I will tell you this, my grandfather was such a tremendous man who had tremendous discipline and tremendous willpower, that, and tremendous faith, that he was like a Superman, I remember after the stroke, when he came home, he was forced to sit on the couch because he really couldn't do anything because it affected his left side. And he was pretty much, paralyzed on his left side. Sounded like somebody's thirsty over there, right? Anyway, so what happened, we would take him and set him up in the couch and kind of prop him up with pillows, and he would be forced to sit there and watch television. Well, my grandmother, she loved her soap operas, and I know that there may be a lot of ladies smiling at me now that remember, when soap operas used to be the #1 thing on television, right? And there's still a lot of that going on today, just in different forms, You can find some of that in the news, right? But anyway, my point is this, that he was forced to sit there and watch these soap operas. Now, that's one thing that he couldn't stand. And I'll tell you, when I was growing up, my grandfather, he used to love to watch Walt Disney, and we would watch Wild Kingdom, remember, sponsored by Mutual of Omaha Insurance. We would watch things like the Grand Ole Opera, and just a lot of good, wholesome movies like that. But during the week, now that was generally at night and on weekends, but during the day, during the week, if we were trying to stay in, and watch TV, knowing that we were supposed to be out there helping him, he might come in, we might sneak in the house, and use an excuse to go in there, maybe to get a drink or something, and he would catch us watching TV, and he would holler at us and tell us to turn the idiot box off, and he would call us houseflies, and he'd say, "You need to get out here and let's work." And he used to tease me a lot too, and he'd say, "You know what, you need to work, you can rest when you get old." He was the type of person that came up with hard work values, and I think that that's where I got mine. And I'll tell you what, it has served me well in my life, because I have never collected unemployment. I have never been on food stamps, which there were a lot of times when I should have been. To be honest with you, I should have been, but I had too much pride to do it. And I thought, you know what, I'll just go out and find me another job. And I did. And it may not always be what I wanted, but it got me by until I could, find something else, right? Welfare and things like that, it's good. It's good for people. But it's not like Senator Kennedy says, it's not a parking lot. It's a bridge to get you from where you're at currently to help you to get you where you need to go. It is temporary. It's not like, you know, some place that you're going to set up camp and that's where you're going to live, right? So there was many times, like I say, when I probably should have been, but I had too much pride and I just went out and I found myself another job. Like I said, it may not have been what I wanted, but I found one and we got by and we made it, even after I was married and those kids were real little. So hard work has served to help me throughout my life, and having those type of ethics instilled in me when I was a child. At the time I didn't understand it, and I used to complain a whole lot because we had to raise those gardens and we had to cut firewood when we had, you know, a furnace downstairs. Why do we have to cut firewood? Why can't we just turn it on? Because it was electric, you know. He was trying to save money. I can remember having a chandelier up over our table, right? And it had, I don't know, maybe 20 bulbs in it. But they were all unscrewed except maybe one on each side right there. All the rest of them, you know, and if you left a room, you could turn the light out, you know, and go into the next room, because if you're not in there, there's no point in having that light on. And that's the way I still live. Even though I've got that solar down there and it regenerates itself, that's been instilled in me, you know, and I just basically consider it a waste to have that light on. So even now, when I leave a room in there, if I'm in there watching television and I come into the kitchen to do something, I'll turn that light out and I'll turn this one on. Those are the values that were instilled within me to save in any direction that I could. So with that said, get back to the story of my grandpa. He would sit there and he would watch those soap operas and he would just get so worked up because, you know, she's in there working. So he wanted us to go and get him one of those Nerf balls. You know, they had just came out, this was like in the early 70s. They'd just come out with the Nerf balls. Now back then they didn't have, you know, a lot of rehab for people that had a CVA, which is cardiovascular accident, which is basically a stroke. And he wanted one of those Nerf balls. So we got him one, and he would sit there and he would, well, first of all, he had to focus, right, to be able to even move his fingers. Because, you know, the brain's like, well, you know, I don't know how to connect anymore down there. But he would focus on that, and then, you know, little by little. Now, what I'm telling you happened over a period of a little bit more than a year, okay? But my grandfather did his own rehab, because he's like sitting there thinking to himself, I'm not going to live like this. I don't accept this. I know it's happened to me, but I don't have to stay here, right? So he would focus, and he got to where he could use his fingers a little bit, and he would get to squeezing that ball. Well, now this went on for a while. I don't remember exactly how long, but I'm just telling you a story because at the time I was about 10 years old. And he would squeeze that ball. Well, he got to where he could work his hands, all right? Then he told me, he said, now you remember the flashlights that had the square battery kind of like so. He said, get the battery out of the flashlight. And we did. And he would sit there. And he, honestly, folks, I'm not lying to you when I say he might sit there for 4 to 6 to maybe even 8 hours because of the tremendous discipline that he had. He would hold that battery in his hand and prop his arm, you know, on the arm of the chair or the couch, wherever he was sitting, or wherever we put him, and he would lift that battery. You know, in the beginning it was difficult, just like if you was to go down to the gym and you never lifted weights before and you start lifting weights, it's a little difficult. And so for him it was difficult, right? Having the stroke, but yet he would do it. He would force himself to do it, and he would just sit there and he would watch the television because he couldn't really go anywhere and do anything, remember? And he would just lift that battery. So what he was doing in the beginning, he was getting his upper mobility, strength, and what have you, back into operating order. Now I will tell you this, he was never the same as he was before the stroke. But wait till I finish telling you the story. So he would do that, and this went on for quite a while too. So he finally got the strength back in that one arm that he couldn't use after the stroke, to be able to lift his arm and to be able to use his hand. Now, it never was the same, like I say. But, you know, he had right side, but he couldn't use the left side. But he worked himself through physical therapy of his own to be able to move his fingers and to be able to lift his arm and use his hand again. We would help him down out of the couch, and he would use both hands now and still his one good leg, and he would practice crawling. Now, when he first started crawling, it was kind of funny, you know, to see him doing that, because he would move his hands and he would get that one knee up there and he would pull that basically dead leg, you know, so to speak, behind him. But he was still trying to use his ab muscles and pull that leg back up there so that, you know, he could put his weight on it and continue. And it was a sight to behold, actually, because he looked like an infant, you know, who hadn't learned to walk yet, crawling around on the floor. He would crawl through the family room into the living room and around, and he'd come back the other direction, and he would just go around and around and around until his knees got sore. We would help him back in the couch. He would go back to lifting the battery, watching TV, and he'd say, help me back down. We'd help him back down, and he would continue this, you know, and it might go on for 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes, and we'd have to help him back up in the couch. But I'll tell you what he did. He finally got that leg to be able to help support his weight. He finally got that leg to be able to where he could actually use it just a little bit, to the point to where now he could stand up, holding to the wall, support his weight, and be able to use it just a little bit. And then he had us moving the couches, you know, and everything, where he could actually get to the wall, and then he would walk that same path, being able to be close to the wall in case he fell. He could hopefully catch himself, right? Or if he got off balance, I should say. And he would do that. You know, he would come in and he would sit down. He would be just totally exhausted. It got to the point where now he was able to walk. He was able to support his weight, and he had his balance back. But still, he never was the man that he used to be, right? But then he would go outside and he would walk to the garage, which was only about maybe 75 feet away from the house. And he would walk back, and he may sit down, okay? And then he'd rest a little bit, and he'd get up and he'd go do it again. He'd come back and sit down. Then after he got to doing that for a while and was gaining more strength, we had a chicken house up on the hill behind the main house over there, and he would walk up the hill, okay? Because walking uphill is not the same as walking on level ground. So he was using a different muscle group, but he was also continuing to strengthen himself, and he was also increasing his ability to balance himself on uneven ground. So regardless of whether it was tilted this way or if it was forward or backward, he was improving himself continually. And then it got to where he would walk down to the road, which was probably 150 yards to the mailbox, and then he would walk back up. He may sit down and rest and turn right around, and in the same day, walk back down there again and walk back up. And he did that for a while. And folks, I want to tell you, it was a little over a year that he did that. But he got enough of his ability back to where he could function well enough physically that he could actually drive again. And he would drive to the grocery store, he would get groceries, he would do the shopping, and then he would bring it back home. My grandmother sometimes would go with him, but he would go to town and take care of the little errands, and he would come back home. Well, one day he came back home with an application for employment. He came home with a job application for Food City. I don't know if you have those in your area, but it's just like Kroger or any other major establishment that you may have. They hired him, and he worked there for 10 more years. He would bag groceries, he would set produce out, he did anything that they needed. They didn't give him a regular position. He was just kind of like the swing man. If they needed something, they would go to him and say, Henry, can you do this? And he would say, absolutely. And he worked 10 more years. So my grandfather actually worked 37 years. 27 years for the insurance company. He had the stroke. He had to do his own rehab. But then he worked 10 more years. And then, you know, his last few remaining years before he actually passed away. But, you know, that man had my total respect. And we need people like that in our country today. And I am so thankful that, see, my mother and my father got a divorce when I was 3 years old. My sister, she was a little less than a year old. And instead of us going, my mother couldn't take care of us, and my dad certainly, you know, having to hold down a job, he couldn't take care of us, and he wasn't remarried at the time. He finally, you know, got remarried, but they got divorced, and my grandparents took us in and raised us. And I am so thankful that they did that, because that instilled within me to be able to pass that on to my children. And I hope that my children pass that on to their children. Because, you know, we need people who can fight like that, who will not conform to the status quo. And, you know, you may be in that position. You may have had a stroke, and it may have had affected you differently. And I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the willpower and the discipline and the drive from inside to not be able to accept the status quo and to move from where you're at to where you want to be, regardless of what it is in life. If it's a job and you want a different one, if it's the life that you're living now and you want a different one, if it's something that you've experienced physically and you don't want to accept it and you want to move on, you know, doesn't mean that you're going to be the same Superman that you used to be years ago. And he never was the same. But he was a whole lot different than he was when we came home from the hospital and brought him home after the stroke. He was in the hospital for about 2 weeks. Like I say, they didn't set up no rehab because they didn't have it back then. But he did his own because he didn't want to accept being like that, because he was such a strong individual to start with. And you know, if he hadn't have done that, he would have probably died, because he just wasn't going to live like that, you know. So I just want to tell you that little story about my grandfather, because that is something that I will carry my whole life with me through everything that I do. And there's been times that I have been knocked down, you know, in life for doing the things that I chose to do. And it doesn't mean that, you know, I chose to do the right thing. I always tried to, but it may not have worked out. But I certainly didn't lay there and wallow in self-pity about where I was at, you know. And I always knew that there was something that I could do about it if I was just willing to get up and do it. And I heard Senator Kennedy, bless his heart, I love that man. He said, you know, the best way to help a man to get on his feet is to tell him to stand up and get off his butt. And you know, that's exactly right. The best thing that you can do to help yourself is to get in motion. And eventually you will find an avenue to help you to get to where you want to go. But a lot of folks are unwilling to do that. But we need more people that are willing to do it. You might say, Richard, well, what's this kind of video help us, you know? You tune in here to see what I'm doing or what's behind the scenes going on up here at the cabin. Well, I'll tell you what, folks, with everything that's going on now and the stuff that you're watching when you're not watching this channel and maybe some other things, you know, you're getting bombarded with a whole lot of stuff, especially what's going on now, you know, about the uncovering of everything that's been happening behind the scenes, and it is not nice. You need stories like this to help you to get through, and maybe you've been having hard times, you know, to help you to maybe get up and get the motivation to be able to do something. You know, I'm kind of shooting from the hip here with a different type of a video, but I just thought, you know, everything that's going on in the world right now, and especially in our country, in the news, and people are being hammered with this every day, every direction that you turn. I thought, you know, this is very uplifting for me. So I'm just going to share it with everybody else, because anytime I get in a bad situation, it's so inspiring for me to sit back and think about what he went through and how he came through it. even though he was never the same, but he came through it to where he could continue and pursue the rest of his life with integrity and some dignity, and to be able to not conform to what had stopped him or what had held him down from being able to be an active person. Okay, he just wanted to be active. He wanted to be productive. He didn't want to feel like he was taking anything from anybody. Never did. And people would always come to him, for help, and he would always help them. He had such a tremendous heart, but a wonderful, wonderful man. His mother was Choctaw Indian, and I mentioned that recently in a statement. Now, he was one of 4 brothers. The other 3 had a different mother, but his mother was Choctaw Indian, and his dad was actually adopted. My last name would actually be Perry if he hadn't been adopted by Dr. Knox back in the day. Anyway, so now you know a little bit more about me. But I share this with you to try to inspire you, to try to give you hope that, a lot of times we don't have to accept where we're at. We can move forward. It may not be exactly where we want to go, and I'm sure he would have loved to went back to selling insurance and his life just the way that it used to be. But he wasn't the same man. But he also wasn't going to accept the fact of being the man he was when he came home from the hospital either, because he just wasn't put together that way. So I just wanted to share maybe some uplifting words with you all that might help inspire you, especially during the times that we're going through now. And thank you so much for the nice comments that you sent on the curtains that were made in there. Hey, that was the cheapest way to put or to finish the cabinets in there in the kitchen, and it just reminded me of Grandma's house. And I told my daughter, I think it was about a year ago, I said, this is the idea that I've got for the kitchen cabinets. What do you think? And I said, it'd be just like going to Grandma's house, wouldn't it? And she goes, absolutely. So that's what we did. And I'll tell you, it costs almost nothing to do that. And that's what I'm about. I'm about saving money and using that money somewhere else where it might be more important. But anyway, friends, thank you so much for all the nice comments on those curtains. It's very appreciated, and everything that we do up here. I hope each and every one of you have a very wonderful week. We want to thank you from the bottom of our heart for all the support that you give us, and we want to invite you back up here to the cabin again next time.